I'll be sharing my time with Honourable Member from Richmond Hill. I rise to speak on Bill C-42 that will implement a public and searchable beneficial ownership registry of corporation governed under the Canada Business Corporations Act. We have an issue with money laundering and terrorist financing. To deal with this, we need tools and mechanisms in Canada that is in line with international best practices. Creating a public and searchable registry will increase the transparency of beneficial owners of federally regulated Canadian corporations, which will increase corporate accountability and improve public trust in corporate institutions. These measures will help protect Canadians against money laundering and terrorist financing, deterring tax evasion and tax avoidance, and making sure Canada remains an attractive place to conduct business. I will take a moment to mention what corporations are. Corporations exist basically to allow individuals to channel their capital for the benefit of making profits. The corporation, as we know, came into existence in the 1844 Act in Britain, and the shareholders were granted limited liabilities in 1855. In 1866, the United States Code declared a corporation is a natural person. Basically, while the corporation channels the resources for investment in the commercial enterprise, it limits the liabilities of the person to the capital contributed. I will quote from an article published in New Internationalist. What is a corporation? Ambrose Bierce Devil's Dictionary defines it as an ingenious device for obtaining profit without individual responsibility. It's a legal construct, a charter granted by the state to a group of investors to gather private funds for a specific purpose. Originally, charters were granted in the service of a public purpose and could be revoked if this were not fulfilled. The relationship between the state and corporation is a complex one. Over the past 400 years, corporations have conquered territory and brought in resources for the state and breaking laws put in place to constrain them and gaining in power and privilege. History shows a repetitive cycle of corporation overreaching, causing such social turmoil that state is forced to rein them back through regulation. Now, corporations are being created for no other purpose than to evade or avoid taxes. Supreme courts around the world have ruled on the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion and mentioned that if there are any transaction followed by an individual or a corporation that does not have any impact or consequence other than to reduce or eliminate tax, the transaction can be declared null and void. So we need to take all steps to rein back and to plug the loopholes that are exploited by individuals and corporations to avoid or evade from paying their fair share of taxes. In Budget 2022, we committed to implement a public and searchable registry of beneficial ownership information. The registry will cover corporations governed under the Canada Business Corporations Act and will be scalable to allow access to the beneficial ownership data held by provinces and territories that agree to participate. The objective of the registry is to provide relevant authorities with timely access to accurate and up-to-date information about the true controlling individuals of corporations in order to combat illegal activities, including money laundering, corruption, and tax evasion. The objective of the registry is to provide relevant authorities with timely access to accurate and up-to-date information about the true controlling individuals or corporation in order to combat illegal activities, including money laundering, corruption, and tax evasion. Greater transparency will also improve corporate accountability more generally and thus help protect the public, improve trust in corporate institutions, and ensure a well-functioning marketplace. As it currently stands, corporations are already obligated to compile some beneficial ownership information. Upon entry into force of this new piece of legislation, corporations will need to collect additional information from their beneficial owner like citizenship, residential address, and send the information in their register of individuals with significant control to Corporations Canada on an annual basis and within 15 days on which a change is recorded in the register. I think there are a couple of shortcomings in the current bill which can be overcome. One is the fully publicly disclosing the names and citizenship of shareholders or members of corporations. The fundamental question is, why should public not be aware who are investing in corporation, including their citizenship being known? It is not the fundamental right of any individual that he or she can be a shareholder. It is a privilege offered by the states through various acts. So why the public not be aware of individuals who are shareholders, including their citizenship? I do understand the need for the privacy on info like the address of a shareholder, which is something that has been addressed. But there is no reason why the names and citizenship of the shareholders of any corporation be kept from becoming public. Especially, we Canadians should be aware of foreign nationals investing in Canadian corporations, and disclosing their citizenship is a must. There is another suggestion that the info may be disclosed only if a threshold of ownership is significant and exceed a certain mark. For significant shareholding, the threshold is 25% in some jurisdictions and 10% in some other jurisdictions. But using a threshold to limit disclosure requirements creates a loophole which can easily be exploited. If the threshold is fixed at 25%, 5 people could form a corporation with 20% each, or 11 people could form a corporation if the threshold is 10%. On the positive side, through this bill, we have sought to limit administrative burden by leveraging existing intake and reporting mechanisms that federal corporations already are familiar with. Federal corporations, for example, already required to update Corporation Canada within 15 days after a change of directors occurs and file an annual return. We have carefully considered domestic and international best practices in developing the proposed beneficial ownership registry regime, including the UK's system. We also have made sure the proposed model would meet and exceed the standards for beneficial ownership transparency maintained by the Financial Action Task Force, the global anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing body, of which Canada is a founding member. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I just want to reiterate that this is a good bill, which is very much required, and we have to bring Canadian standards in line with the international best practices. But there are certain shortcomings, which I hope should and must be addressed at the committee stage. And I'm sure that with the cooperation of all parties in this House, this bill will get passed and it will become a legislation sooner than later. Thank you, Mr.